All right, and here we go yet again. It's B-Sox and my friend Andy Hall. We are in my basement, and we're talking about football, which, you know what, is never a bad thing.
I could sit here and do this all night. I mean, like, I know I get paid to talk on the radio and play rock music, but, like, this is the way to make a living.
Oh, yeah.
Right here.
This is just sitting around screwing around and talking about, I think Iowa's going to, make a really good, run at having...
Oh, wait. I got something here underneath my seat. It's in my butt. Hold on. Oh, I just pulled out the prediction for the Iowa-Tennessee game.
Yeah, pretty much. So, as we did a couple years ago with a show called Unsanctioned, which was actually kind of cool. It's a little bit more high-tech now, though. Here we are. Yeah, in the basement studios.
It's like Wayne's World.
I'll have to show you guys Devastator a little bit later on. I literally have Devastator here in the basement. We talked about Iowa a little bit ago, Iowa and Tennessee in the Tax Slayer Bowl. Now we're going to move on to something that's brand new in the college football world, and that's the college football playoff.
I am fully prepared to make the case that this football playoff should not be 4 teams. It should be 8 at the least.
I agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree with you.
The reason I bring this up before we even get started is obviously there was a lot of talk when the 4 were unveiled.
Yeah, on Sunday morning.
About teams like TCU in particular.
Baylor.
And Baylor, who were, by the way, the Big 12 champions.
Yeah.
Being left out of this playoff. Now, I can make the argument that there are actually more teams than that deserve a shot at a national championship by virtue of some of the games that they won this year. Ole Miss we touched on in the first segment when we were talking Iowa-Tennessee.
Yeah.
Ole Miss beat Alabama this year. Handed Alabama their one and only loss. That alone, aside from one stumble in their schedule, should allow a team like Ole Miss, who, by the way, somebody did a simulated BCS standing for 2014. If BCS was still around, the 4 teams that are in this year's playoff are the top 4 simulated BCS teams.
Really?
Strangely enough, Alabama came in at number 1. Florida State came in at number 2, which is the only change here.
Okay.
Oregon was 3. Ohio State is 4. Coming in at number 5, TCU. 6, Baylor. 7, Mississippi State. You could make a case for them. Michigan State came in at 8. How I feel about that, I'm not quite certain. I think I'd replace them with Ole Miss.
Maybe, yeah.
And I think the reason for that is strength of schedule.
Yeah, the SEC is definitely this year a little bit tougher than the Big Ten. You know what? I wholeheartedly agree. I think you should have the 5 major conferences. They all get their champion gets in, not 1 or 2 or anything like that. But then you have 3 at-large bids. So if there's a team like TCU, a team like Baylor, they have a chance to still get in, and then you even have like if Boise State's doing well, or
you would have to assume that every major conference has a conference championship game, which currently they do not. Big 12 does not have that,
which they need to.
They do.
They really need to. In that
Bob Bowlesby's dropping the ball.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of finding the right team for that. There's a lot of teams you could throw into that, but I think you got to be smart who you're going to add to the Big 12. I still think they had to go after Boise State. It moves them west, and it's not just this narrow band going, West Virginia, which makes no sense whatsoever. So here we are. We're on the edge of this. It was announced this past weekend of who the teams are going to be, and Alabama going to take on Ohio State in the opening game, and then Florida State and Oregon are going to hook up. I find it amazingly funny that Florida State cannot lose a game in, 2 years, and they're 3rd.
It's the ACC.
Oh, no.
I mean, arguably their biggest competition, maybe North Carolina?
No, January 1st, we will get our the semifinals. Both games going to be on ESPN. First game, Florida State, Oregon.
Well, that's the 2-3 matchup.
Yep. That'll be at the Rose Bowl, too.
And this one is the one that I'm more interested in, not only from a football fan's perspective, but from a personal standpoint, too, because maybe I'm the only one, but I'm so bored with Alabama right now. I'm just bored. They're the Yankees of the NCAA college football, and I'm tired of seeing them there every year, and I don't care. And I hate Nick Saban, too.
Why do you hate Nick Saban?
I just don't like him. He's a weasel.
Just because he's surly?
He's a weasel.
He's a weasel? All right, well.
But from a football fan standpoint, which is where I should direct my energy here, I love this game because you look at the over-under, first of all, and I'm not sure that there's a higher over-under in the Vegas numbers than this game. There's going to be an awful lot of scoring. You're featuring two quarterbacks, one who won the Heisman last year, one who's probably the front runner for this year's Heisman.
Marcus Mariota.
Yeah. And, I mean, two very potent offenses and two high-powered attacks that should just be going at each other.
I watched a couple games with both these teams earlier this year. Oregon is definitely, to me, more impressive. Like, Florida State, a lot of their games was Jameis Winston pulling the win out of his ass at the last minute. I mean, that's the way it is.
It would have been really interesting to see how these teams were seeded had Oregon not slipped up in October when they played Arizona.
Oh, they would have been number one.
My guess is they probably would be, not only because they'd be undefeated, but also because, well, and Alabama has the one loss to Ole Miss, but also because they look virtually unstoppable offensively. I mean, this is a really good Oregon team, and it's going to be a fun game to watch.
With that being said, I'm going to go Oregon on this. I like Oregon. I think they're fun. The uniform thing doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I love it. I love that they come out with something like that every week. I think it's cool. I think you know what, as stupid as it sounds, it gets players there.
It's a great recruiting tool, and not to mention marketing tool. They probably make a lot of money off of those different looks.
Yeah, I do think Jameis Winston will keep them in the game. I don't think this will be a runaway victory for Oregon, but I think it's an Oregon win.
They have Oregon as an 8.5-point favorite in this one with an over-under of 71. That's a high-scoring game.
That's no defense.
I'm going to predict the Oregon Ducks beat the Florida State Seminoles, and I think 71 might even be a little too high in this one. I think Oregon scores 38 points, and I see Florida State scoring 28.
Okay, so
say 38-28.
You're going to give them a 10-point win.
10 points. It'll be over the 8.5.
Now we go over to Alabama and Ohio State. Alabama, rightfully so, your number one team after just another year where they're good. I mean, it's an Alabama team. It doesn't change. They do what they need to win.
But what are they? Are they a great running team? No. Are they a great passing team? Sometimes. Are they a great defense? Sometimes. That's the thing about Alabama. They've never really put together one complete game.
Yeah.
Where they are great in all phases. They're either great in one thing or another.
Yeah.
And it's never and another. It's or another.
But, they went on the road. They went on the road to some pretty hostile places. They won at Tennessee this year. They won at LSU, which winning, and that was, I want to say that was a night game too. You don't win at LSU in a night game. You just don't. Beat Auburn.
And that was a game too. Remember, that was the game, like 3 interceptions, and they were down, and then they came back, 5 scoring drives in a row, I think it was. Unbelievable.
So you put them up against a Big Ten champion, Ohio State. Now, this is the reason I think they got in, okay? And everybody's like, TCU and Baylor this and, that and everything in between. How many times do you ever see a championship game where they 59-point the opposing team and hold them to a goose egg?
It wasn't just the fact that they destroyed Wisconsin, which is a pretty decent Big Ten team. They did it with a third-string quarterback.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Next year, what kind of quarterback battle are they going to have? Because Braxton Miller will be back because he took the medical red shirt.
And J.T. Barrett had a really nice season. In fact, he was a Heisman. He was kind of in the Heisman talk there for a while before he got hurt, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's one reason Ohio State got in. I think the other reason, TCU and Baylor both won their last games. Baylor's last game was against Kansas State, who was ranked, I want to say, in the top 10 with K-State. I know they're at least top 15.
Those simulated BCS rankings I told you about, I want to say that they were number 10 or 11, Kansas State. Yeah.
Okay. So you have that, but it's not a championship game. On Saturday, when these games happened, what games were you paying attention to? Were you paying attention to, TCU? Yeah, TCU beat Iowa State by about 50 points or whatever it was. But nobody was talking about that at the end of the day. It wasn't a championship game. I mean, you don't do that when there's the SEC championship, the Big Ten championship,
Right.
all this. So I think that's another reason. I think their one loss to Va Tech, which is a horrible loss to begin with, but it was so early in the season with a second string quarterback that they had a pretty good run after that. And here's my conspiracy theory. I think it's name recognition. I think for the first ever college football playoff, after you're coming off a time with the BCS, that, let's face it, BCS didn't always work out for the best. Did it get better when they put the national championship game in? Yeah. But it still wasn't a great system. I think for the first time they're going to use this college football playoff, they want big name teams, which Florida State has been a household name forever. Alabama, household name forever. Ohio State, household name forever. And Oregon, they've been a household name since, I don't know, late 90s.
But they've never gotten that real big shot.
They've been in the national championship, or at least in a hunt. They've been in a BCS Bowl. I think last year was the first time they weren't in a BCS Bowl for a while because they played Texas for Mac Brown's final game. Mm-hmm. I think there's a name recognition that kind of may have been kind of the other point where, you know what, who's going to tune in more? Ohio State fans? Is that a bigger fan base than TCU? Yes. Is that a bigger fan base than Baylor? Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's why they're in.
I'll take you down the wormhole even further. Do you know who's on the committee? Let me just clue you in. There are several former Big Ten figureheads.
Okay.
Within the selection committee.
Is Alvarez in there?
Yes.
Barry?
Yes. He's one of them. Go ahead and take a look sometime as to who's on this committee. That might answer your question, too, as to why they feel the way that you're hypothesizing.
I really think that's why. I mean, is Baylor and TCU a better team than Ohio State?
Don't know.
I don't know.
They didn't get to play.
I don't know, but I think out of, if you played a 10-game series, I think Baylor TCU probably wins more than Ohio State.
I'm not so sure.
Really?
Yep. And again, this is why I think my argument is being made for me here that this college football playoff, while it is a step in the right direction, didn't go far enough.
Yeah.
Clearly. And we're going to continue to have these conversations. And you could also make the argument that, hey, you're saying make it 8 teams or at least 8 teams. The next person down the line might say, well, I can make an argument for 15, 16 teams. All of a sudden you become the March Madness of college football. And you can't really do that because of time constraints.
Yeah.
I'm sure the NCAA would love that.
But you can do it with you and I and all them. That's always kind of my joke. Oh, we don't want to have them out of class for this long. You do it with the division underneath them.
Yeah.
How do you justify? Do those kids not need to go to school? As it comes down, I think Alabama blows out Ohio State.
I don't think it'll be 59-0 like Ohio State did to Wisconsin. But I do think that Alabama's defense will show up in this game.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that Ohio State's quarterback situation, while he looked very good, serviceable, I think he threw 5 touchdowns in that game against Wisconsin. This is a different caliber of defense.
Oh, yeah.
That he's going to face. And again, Alabama hasn't been great on defense every game this year. But when they've been good, they've been very good. And the caliber of athlete they have there,
it's just way better
compared to what Ohio State has. And granted, Ohio State had some great rushing numbers this year, particularly Ezekiel Elliott, their leading rusher. He rushed for over 1,400 yards on the season. I could see them trying to play a ball control game, but the fact that Alabama can score points so quickly by virtue of their passing game particularly, looking at Amari and how quickly that he can score, I don't see how Ohio State can play the kind of game they want to play in order to stay competitive.
I don't think Urban Meyer goes in against Alabama with this team and wins. So my national championship, which I think it's the same as yours, is going to be Alabama and Oregon, number 1 versus number 2.
I agree with that. The Alabama-Ohio State game has Alabama favored by 9. I think they beat them by more than that. And the over-under is 58. That sounds about right.
Okay.
So I think if I'm going to try to predict a final score, I would say maybe like Alabama 37, Ohio State 17.
Alrighty. So you have your national championship game, which is a theoretical game between Alabama and Oregon at this point because we don't know.
Yep.
But my heart will go with Oregon. I want to see Oregon win. I think they're fun to watch. but it is so hard to go against Nick Saban in the big game.
This is the game everybody wants to see outside of the Ohio State and Florida State fan bases, because these are the two teams that have been on a collision course all year long.
I think they get beat by about 10. I think they'll shut down Oregon's offense. I think Mariota would have, like flashes of, hey, he's keeping them in the game, but I think that's all you're going to get. I think Nick Saban he'll come up with a plan, and he's going to destroy these guys.
He's been there before, and these players, a lot of them have been there before. Yeah. And by virtue of that, unfortunately, I would also predict an Alabama win, which pains me because I hate Alabama.
All right, that's going to wrap up the college football playoff talk. If you want to see more about fantasy football, if you're more into that, 515 Fantasy Football is up on Facebook. It's run by our friend Andy here, who does an amazing job, especially with Blitzkrieg McGrew as his top running back pick for this year.
Actually, he's the top back in the Canadian Football League. I drafted him in the first round.
We'll be back with our 3 bowl games that they don't have to be good. We just want to watch.